Hello, today is Tuesday, March 15th, 2011. I'm with Dr. George Reed, who is the Executive Director of the North Carolina Council of Churches, and we're standing before the General Assembly building in Raleigh. The Assembly is in session, and I wanted to have a brief conversation with George about the work of the Council with the General Assembly and an upcoming legislative seminar. George, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Bishop Troy. Glad to be here.
George, what are some of the issues that are coming before the General Assembly that the Council is actually paying attention to and monitoring?
Right. Yes. The major issue that will dominate the whole session is the state budget. And as your viewers probably already know, there's a projected budget deficit of $2.7 billion. And the question is going to be, do we balance that budget entirely by cuts in programs, or do we look at some sources of revenue that would soften the blow of cuts in programs? We'll be watching that. Some of the programs that are likely to be cut are ones that are important to us, and some of the taxes are important in terms of tax justice. The revenue sources are important in terms of tax justice, so that the balancing of the budget is a balanced balancing, if you will. It's not done entirely by cuts, but also includes some revenue enhancements. So that is the big issue that will dominate the whole session. There are other issues coming along that we're aware of that are important that we'll be monitoring. Just today, a bill was introduced to require a photo ID in order to vote. Something that on the face of it may sound like a really reasonable thing. You ought to identify yourself when you go to vote, but the practical effect will be hundreds of thousands of voters who will not have the photo ID because they don't have driver's licenses. They may be elderly and don't drive anymore. My mother never had a driver's license. And so people who fall into the category of not being drivers, maybe they don't have cars, maybe they can't afford a car, they don't have the photo ID. And so the question will be whether a system is set up that enables them easily and simply to get a photo ID, or do they just not vote because it's too much of a hassle. And in a time when there's concern about voter participation anyway, from our standpoint, throwing an obstacle in the face of older people or poorer people just doesn't make any sense to us. So that's another issue that we'll be working on. There are several bills that have been introduced that address questions of immigration and immigrants. And they're just about all of them not friendly to immigrants. I think the one that's of most concern to many of us, at least of the ones that have been introduced as of today, is the one that would exclude undocumented immigrant students from the community college system and from the University of North Carolina system. Currently, undocumented students can be in those systems, but they pay out-of-state tuition. This bill would exclude them entirely, and so you might have a student who's come up through the public schools of North Carolina, who's excelled academically, who's graduated from high school and done really well, and we're saying, I'm sorry, you can't go to school anymore in this state. Seems to us to be a really foolish way to deal with students, to exclude them from higher education, further education.
You are very much involved in the life of the General Assembly and tracking it and monitoring it, and there are a number of resources that are available on the Council website, Raleigh Report, just a number of things that are available.
Yes.
But one of the things that's coming up is the legislative seminar that you do at least annually and sometimes twice a year, depending on when they're in session again.
We actually do it on an annual basis, either in Raleigh or another location. In Raleigh, it's a biennial thing. So this is our biennial legislative seminar to be here in Raleigh. And it is coming up. It's in early April. It's on April the 5th, Tuesday. We're going to be at St. Mark's Episcopal Church, so we'll be in one of your congregations. Lorraine Lundgren, who is the rector there, will be leading us in a closing service there. We start with worship, and then we have a series of workshops on many of the issues before the General Assembly. Some of these workshops are specific to some of the issues I've already mentioned and other issues. Some of the workshops are how to do it workshops.
Right.
So there's one on the legislative process, one on how to be an effective lobbyist, one on social networking for social justice. And there's also one this year on finding hope in times of discouragement, because this is a difficult legislative session for many of us who've worked for prophetic issues, social justice issues. And so how to deal with the discouragement of not making progress and trying not to have too much regress, if you will. So we have a workshop on that as well.
That's going to be April 5th. That's a Tuesday, beginning at 8:45, St. Mark's in Raleigh.
That's right. That's right. And we welcome anybody watching this to come and join us. We usually have 200 to 250 faith-based social justice activists who come for a day of briefing on legislative issues. They come for inspiration, and they also come from for the fellowship that we receive by being together with one another and kind of talking about issues and planning for the future and equipping ourselves to be effective advocates across the street here.
You've got one other resource that impacts what happens across the street here and what happens in our wide society as Christians witnessing to the way of Jesus in this world. And I want you to tell us about that resource that's brand new to the Council.
We have just set up a sermon library on the Council of Churches website, which has sermons on topics of social justice. Most of them are sermons that have been delivered by pastors here in North Carolina, so there's a North Carolina focus to just about everything there. It's a sermon library that's still a work in process. Anybody that wants to submit a sermon, we will certainly take a look at it, and might well be something that we could add. And to help us as people of faith to practice our faith in these daily areas of social justice.
George, the work of the Council is a remarkable thing, and I thank God for it, and we want to support you as much as we can in that work.
Thank you for the membership of the Episcopal Diocese of North Carolina in the Council of Churches, for the financial support, for the participatory support, for the prayers. We need all of that. So thank you. Thank you.
We're keeping on. You may notice in the background that the flags of our country and of the state are at half-mast. The reason they are at half-mast is in honor of the death and the burial of the last veteran of the First World War. From the General Assembly in Raleigh, North Carolina, God bless, and you keep the faith.